Happy Wednesday, everybody, and welcome to RAMP, Real Access Motivates Progress, live weekly podcast. We are so glad that all of you viewers out there tonight have joined us, and I have an amazing show to you, but I say that every week because we have fabulous people here in Rhode Island that we like to highlight and pronounce all of the wonderful resources they provide and all of the hard work that they do each and every day. Today, we are talking to AUSTIC, Ocean State Trauma-Informed Community Coalition. I hope I got that right. And welcome to all of my guests tonight.
Thank you.
Did I get it right?
You got it right.
Perfect.
Oh, great. We're going to go around and I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourself and to tell us a little bit about what you do so we can all get to know you a little bit better. Christine, let's start with you.
Okay. My name's Christine Hathaway. I'm Senior Director for Behavioral Health Services at Perspective Corporation. I work with adults who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. I'm a board-certified behavior analyst and one of the founders of AUSTIC.
Oh, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Will, how about you going next?
Sure. My name is Will Bodwin, and I am actually not in the field of, I'm not a clinician. I'm a person who's a parent of a person with a disability. My son has autism. He's 30 years old. And in real life, I'm a music teacher.
That's awesome. That is so great. Randy, how about you?
Well, like Christine, I work in the world of IDD, the developmental disability world, and I'm a clinician, clinical supervisor over at Looking Upwards Incorporated in the James L. Maha Center in Middletown. And I also have a private practice, private psychotherapy practice in Middletown, Rhode Island. And again, a co-founder of AUSTIC.
Oh, that is awesome. I'm going to start with you, Randy. And if the question is better suited for somebody else, please let me know. But how was AUSTIC founded and how did this get brainstormed to be a coalition?
So I think it was approximately 10 years ago. It might be a little bit longer than that now. In the state of Rhode Island, we were really struggling with in the clinical world, supporting people with developmental disabilities and behavioral challenges, real significant behavioral challenges and comorbid mental health issues. We were really struggling with what's a good behavioral model or a psychological model to support these folks, to keep them in the community and integrate them into the community. So you have behavior modification, you have different techniques that we all know about, we all heard of. And we were really struggling with that because we were overusing things like restraint, prone restraint, physical intervention. And so a small group of us got together, myself, Will, Christine, a couple other people, Chris Emond up at BHGDH in the state. And we really started looking at different models that were out there. And we came across trauma-informed care, which was a model that was being used nationally, and really started exploring that and looking into that. And when we started comparing it to what they were looking at and what they were basing their research on, which was the ACE study, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, adverse childhood experiences, and comparing it to our population, well, there was a lot of correlates between the two, because a lot of our folks grew up in either institutional settings or foster care settings, where there were things like physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, that sort of thing. And then we started noticing if we applied those principles to our population, we saw significant differences. We immediately implemented it sort of statewide and started noticing that restraint numbers were going down significantly. We were able to get rid of prone restraint in the state of Rhode Island. Legislatively, we were able to get rid of it. And just amazing results across the state. And then so what that bred was this group kept meeting and kept talking. And we talked about how can we get this distributed and spread throughout the state of Rhode Island? Because wouldn't it be great if the whole state operated this way, not just our field necessarily? And hence this grew and it grew and it grew. And I think here we are today as a result.
It's so true because, if all organizations work together, we could get more accomplished. Because again, this is Rhode Island. Everybody knows the guy. Everybody knows somebody that, we can make more things happen. We're stronger together, and banding together just makes more sense. Will, this must have been a great thing for you, especially having a child, on the spectrum. What did this mean to you, and how do you feel about being involved in this?
Well, actually, sort of some of the things that happened to my son were a catalyst for a lot of this work. When my son was school aged, he was a person who he could not speak. And so, because he couldn't speak, he had a lot of difficulty communicating with other people. So, if he didn't like something that he was being asked to do, after a while, he would put up with it for a while. After a while, he would get annoyed, and before you know it, he would lash out at the person who was his teacher or his aide or whatever at the time. And don't you know, in a very short amount of time, he would be in a restraint. So my son has a significant history of restraint. Uh, when he was around 13 or 14 years old, there was one 3-month period where he was restrained about 30 or 40 times. And sometimes for significant amounts of time. There was one day where he was pinned to the floor for about 2 hours out of that day.
Jeez.
And so the way we found out about it as his parents were, we would see him, he was in a group home at the time, and we would see him. And one day we went to give him a haircut. We took his shirt off, and he was covered. His back was covered. His arms were covered with bruises, and legs were covered with abrasions. And so when we tried to find out what happened to him, it was hard to get that information. And so seeing this happen really made me think about what can I do as a parent to try to stop this and to try to get him into what anybody would think would be an education. Like, what kind of an education is that when you're pinned to the floor 2 out of 3 days, right? So as a result of that, I started to try to get it more involved with finding some solutions. And I started to go to conferences around the country. Back in 2006, I went to a conference that was run by NDRN, the National Disability Rights Network. And that's where I spent a two-day period on training that had to do with reducing seclusion and restraint. Through that, I started to study, if you will, with some of the people who were trying to find alternative ways to help people who are like my son, who are, vulnerable. And how do you find a way to answer the people who say, well, we can't do anything about it because he's being aggressive, right? So in order to be able to reach the people who are treating him, you have to be able to convince them that there's a better way to do it. And as I searched for that and started to be able to interact with some people who are doing training nationally around this issue, I came across this notion of trauma-informed care. And so then I was able to try to bring some of that knowledge that had already been worked through by some of the experts in our field and bring it back to Rhode Island and try to see how can we take this problem that existed in our schools in Rhode Island, and it turns out not only in our schools but in other adult populations as well. How do we get to show Rhode Island that there's a better way to help people who are having difficulty communicating, like my son, or have other issues where they might be susceptible to a restraint or vulnerable to a restraint. So we did a lot of work with the Rhode Island Developmental Disabilities Council, and we're able to try to get the law in Rhode Island changed so that prone restraint is no longer legal in Rhode Island. Prone restraint is one of the most lethal restraints that you can have, because you have people kneeling on somebody else's back, or people get twisted around in positions where their airflow is restricted, or people fight so hard against the restraint that they can be vulnerable to asphyxiation in some other way, or what's called agitated delirium. And so, luckily we were able, over the course of about 4 years, to work with the DD Council to help to convince people in education and also people in the disability community that there was a better way to help people who are struggling with behavioral issues.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I really think it's an educational thing, because, so many people will say to me, you can't do that. You're in a wheelchair. Well, I say, watch me. It may not look the way you want it to look like, but we can do it in our own way. Christine, I know you do a lot with developmental disabilities, but do you also do for physical disabilities? Do you advocate for physical disabilities as well? And what exactly is your role, at AUSTIC?
So at AUSTIC, what is my role? I'm technically our secretary. I think I help push our agenda along and keep us moving, because we're just a group of volunteers, and we don't have any funding, but we've been at this for a long time and we keep growing. So in my role as a clinician, I supervise other people, and we work with people who have severe aggressive issues in addition to their developmental disability, similar to Will's son. And, a lot of it is, we talk about education, but it's really about culture change and going in and, once you convince leadership, or in Will's case, how he convinced us that there was a better way to do things. And I've been in this field since 1982. So all our training included the use of physical intervention. That's was state of the art for the longest time. So once we were convinced that, yeah, you're right, there is a better way, getting other people to buy in and understand and change their behavior is a whole nother level of intervention and change. It's not about writing a behavior plan. It's really about changing people's mindset. And I think that's what's brought AUSTIC so far, because doing that in the DD community, and most of the people that I work with, very few have physical disabilities in addition to their, just because of the population I work with. But the approach is the same, but you need to convince the caretakers that there's a better way. And more than once, I've run into a staff person who has told me, when I first said, we're not going to put hands on anymore, we're going to do it a different way, that they thought I was crazy, that it couldn't be done, that it was something that had to happen. And then I'd run into them years later and they said, that was the best thing that ever happened. And they started to realize that it was not only about trauma for the individual who is having this done to them, but trauma for the person who has to do it, trauma for other people who have to watch it. There's trauma all the way around. And I think that that's why we're so invested in a trauma-informed approach, because you see it everywhere, and you take it out of the DD community, and it's in the Cumberland Farm store, and it's with the angry driver who's speeding beyond you. It's everywhere. And it's about how people respond when they have experienced negative things, bad things. It changes the way they think and it changes the way they respond. And unless we as people recognize that they're not just, they just don't need to be taught a lesson. It's not that they're just mean people, that they, something has happened to them and that's why they're responding the way they do. That's when you can take that step back and choose how you're going to respond in a way that's not going to make that situation worse. That's going to help people heal and move beyond it versus just propagating that kind of angry, hostile environment. And I think, with everything that's happened in this country, maybe since 9/11, and that things have changed between the way we treat each other. I think the time is right for us as a society at all levels of society to really understand what trauma does to a person and how we can help make that better.
I completely 100% agree with you, because if we can get people to open up and change their perspective and put themselves into other people's shoes, I really think that they have another way of looking at it, and that's what RAMP does. RAMP doesn't believe that anybody is maliciously inaccessible. I believe that they don't know any better because they may not have any dealings with somebody in that community that would need that accommodation. But once they start meeting us and start learning about the different disabilities, they open and change their perspective in a positive way and able to change. Randy, I'm going to throw this question to you. With everything that has happened through COVID and 9/11, I know because of the anniversaries coming up, the mental state of a lot of people right now is in a very gray area because we have all experienced trauma at this point. There's nobody that can say that they have not been affected in some way, either between 9/11, a family issue, or COVID at this point. We've all been traumatized. How does what AUSTIC does play into that role of our, softening mental state right now of people?
Well, I think a couple of things. I agree with you. Having a private psychotherapy practice, and any psychotherapist listening to this podcast probably would tell you they all have waiting lists right now, right? So I hear people call me and I have to put them on a waiting list, and they say I'm getting that everywhere. So I think that's happening everywhere, unfortunately. I think some of the things that we can do, and what I'm encouraging even my private patients to do is to build resiliency, to build positive experiences in your life, and recognize what you've just been through, what we've all just been through. So there's it's a funny little video that we have on our website, and it's called Building Resiliency, and what it talks about is it depicts, it's a sort of a cartoonish type of video. And what it does is it talks about a seesaw. And on one side of the seesaw are all the adverse childhood experiences that may have happened to someone. And then the additional negative things that may have happened to someone, like COVID or all the other things that are going on right now, depression. And that weighs down one side of the seesaw. But all's not lost, because all we need to do is sort of balance that out, balance the seesaw out by building positive experiences on the other side. And that could be meditation, that could be self-care, that could be doing things that that work for you and that build positive experiences to sort of even that seesaw back out again. So when you watch that video, that's what it talks about, because a lot of, unfortunately, with adverse childhood experiences, there can be brain damage that occurs in the development of one's brain that goes through living in a situation like that. But all's not lost, because we can correct that. In therapy, we can correct that, and it's not too late, or it's never too late to do that. It's interesting also that you said that, because I just did a training, or we all just did a training, Christine and I, and another gentleman named Rob from Coventry, and we did it on secondary stress, and we did it for leadership groups, because not only did they go through the stress of COVID personally, and what that meant for them and their own family and their own protection. How am I going to protect my family, etc. But they had the added layer of having the responsibility of leading a group of people, aka leading an agency or being an executive and responsible for all the people under your care and the staff that are servicing them. And so that results in a secondary level of stress. And so we did a whole training on that and educating people about that as well. So I think to answer your question, in the end, it's building resiliency, however, whatever that might mean for you, and building up that other side to shift that fulcrum over back into the middle and get it back balanced again so that you have balance in your life. Because people respond so differently during this. We took surveys in my agency at Looking Upwards. We did surveys, and some people, it was interesting, some of the responses. We had a whole theme that were people that had given up. In other words, I just don't care anymore. I'm not taking care of myself. I'm not exercising. I'm giving up and let myself go. And then we had the other side that was, nope, I'm full in now. I need to exercise. I need to combat this. So it was interesting. And it was about 50-50. It was the results of those questionnaires. So resiliency, I think, is the major theme.
Yeah, I think you're right there, because we can't stop the circumstances. We can't stop what's going to happen to us, but we can react with our responses. And one of my favorite sayings is, your life will not change unless you change one thing that you do all the time. If you don't change, nothing in your life is ever going to change. So we all need to have that positive outlook and find one positive thing every day. And I'll tell you, it's truly gotten me through. Will, how is that? How has change and resiliency gotten you and your family through all of the COVID and the lockdowns and everything? How did that affect you guys?
Well, COVID was tough. My son lives in a group home, and so for the better part of a year, I didn't get to see my son in the same way that people can't see their parents in a nursing home. You know, uh, the regulations in the group home community were such that it was not possible for us to see him. Now, this is coming from a situation where we were seeing him like about 4 times a week, and we were really feeling like he needed to see us 4 times a week. And to Randy's point, we discovered over the year that our son Andre was a lot more resilient than we thought he would be, and he learned to adapt pretty well. He had a pretty good year. I mean, he still missed us, obviously, and we've missed him probably even more than he missed us. But we felt like he came through it pretty well. And actually, for us, it was a good lesson because, one of the things that a parent of an individual who's so vulnerable worries about always is what happens when I'm gone? And what happens when we're not there anymore to help him through whatever it is that he's struggling with at the moment? And I think probably because we're really happy with where he's placed, and we're happy with really the trauma-informed approach that they use at this place, at this home, he was able to adapt to, he even wore a mask sometimes, which shocked me. I didn't think he would ever tolerate having a mask on, but to be able to go into like the grocery store or whatever, he needed to have a mask on. So he was able to adapt to that. And, if anything, we feel like after a year, 18 months worth of COVID, we're still concerned, but we're not as worried about what happens when we're gone as we were beforehand. So the human spirit has a lot of resiliency in it, even for guys like my son.
It's great that you can look at the positive side, because that's the important thing, like I like to think that COVID was a positive side because it gave everybody a small glimpse of what the disability community deals with on a daily basis. You can't go to families' homes. You can't go into places. You can't hug and love your loved ones. You can't participate in weddings or whatever. Everybody got a glimpse in that community. They didn't like it. They didn't like the isolation. So when the world opens up again, take us with you. Let us be part of the everyday. Now that we have our favorite grocery store down the street or our favorite sandwich from the restaurant down the street, let us go and visit your establishment. Let us in. Let us give you our money and make memories at your place. So, I find the positive of COVID that everybody got to see what we were being told for so many years. You can't work by computer. You can't go to school by computer. You can't go to a meeting. It all happened within a month. You know what I mean? The whole world was able to do this within a month and successfully. So it wasn't just that it had to be done, but it was successfully done. So let's keep those avenues open going forward. It just shows you that we are all resilient, that whenever we find a roadblock, we can find a way to tunnel our way through or around or over or however we need to get there. We can find our way. Christine, give us some more information of how people can participate in AUSTIC and your website, and more information of how people can get involved and what kind of people you'd like to be involved.
Sure. But before that, can I talk a little bit about trauma? Because when we use that word, we think, big trauma. We think of our vets coming back from war. We think of COVID. We think of 9/11. We've mentioned all those things. But trauma is really much more subtle than that. And I think a lot of people have experienced trauma in their life, although they don't identify it. In fact, I've spoken to police officers, for example, first responders. Think of all the trauma our first responders are exposed to, the things they see, the things that happen to them that are just not normal. They're dramatic and they're frightening and they have a lasting impact on people. But generally, those folks don't consider that trauma. That's just part of their job. It doesn't mean that it doesn't affect them. It doesn't mean it doesn't change their brain in the way other types of trauma affects people. So when we're talking about trauma, we're talking about, like the result of an event or a series of events that happen to a person that's experienced by that person as either physically or emotional, harmful or life-threatening, and that it has lasting adverse effects on them. So it's homelessness, it's poverty, it's disability. Think of that autistic child who is constantly overwhelmed by their environment that they can't process and can't understand. What you were talking about, people with physical disabilities who can't get out to meet some of their basic needs for companionship, for social interaction, that they're kind of left behind. And even that how society sometimes disregards groups of people can be traumatic. So there are many different circumstances that can cause trauma. And it really is, trauma's in the eye of the person who is experiencing it. So
I'm glad you said that because, well, I'm glad you said that because I'm going to interrupt you for a second and say, people cannot judge other people's trauma because, I hate it when people say to me, you're a 4-time cancer survivor who now can't walk and has no feeling in your legs. My problems are nowhere near yours. It's not a competition. It's not, you could get a paper cut today and that could have been the breaking straw that you needed to have a complete and total meltdown because everything just built up. If your paper cut is your biggest trauma today, it's just as important as me being in a wheelchair and overcoming cancer. We cannot judge the trauma of other people, and it's not a competition. Nobody's pain or suffering is any different or worse than anybody else's. It's how it affects that individual person at that time. Now, continue. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. So that's so true. And it's so important to recognize. And you don't have to know You don't have to know that somebody has had a traumatic experience. The thing about being trauma informed is that you just assume that everyone has had a traumatic experience, something that has affected them, and you act upon that understanding that the majority of our population has experienced trauma. I think 6 out of 10 of the top causes of death in the United States are related to adverse childhood experiences. Diabetes, heart disease, all those things can be traced back to experiences people have had. And those experiences, just something as natural as losing a loved one, that is traumatic. Divorce,
Yeah.
Children of divorce, that is traumatic. Those things are all very traumatic. So what AUSTIC is really trying to do is kind of take what we've done in the disability community and take that broader to help people understand what trauma is and how it impacts people, so that people can change how they interact, to help us develop a healing community, as opposed to a community that just keeps traumatizing people. And I think, I don't have a specific example off the top of my head, but I'm sure there are dozens in your audience where they could talk about how they've gone to a state office or to somewhere where they're supposed to get help, and the systems, the policies, the procedures were just as traumatic as whatever it's just reopened that wound of trauma. So we want to help people, organizations understand that they need to change. They need to think about what they do in their practices through a trauma-informed lens to help everyone in our community heal. So we're just, as a group, go ahead.
Can you give us AUSTIC's website and how people can get to AUSTIC and learn more about you guys?
Mm-hmm. It's austic.org. It's OSTICC.org, O-R-G. So that will get you to our website.
And I think what you guys do, and what people need to understand, every business, every organization, every person, every advocate, you are going to cross the disability community. With it being 1 in 4 people in our country having a disability, if you're not trauma informed, or you're not informed of how to interact with the disability community, you are going to have a negative encounter. You're going to cause trauma to somebody. So everybody needs to get this information, because no matter if you have a small little tiny little business somewhere or a giant conglomerate business, somewhere along the way, you are going to interact with the disability community. Randy, give us some ideas of what people can do to get better informed and to make sure that they're having positive interactions.
Well, one of the things that I always like to tell people about trauma-informed care is that there's 2 sides of it. So the one side of it is understanding that everybody's probably had some level of trauma in their life, whether or not they meet all the criterion on the ACE study, the 10 questions around if was there violence in the house and all that stuff is one matter. So there's one side where people probably have experienced trauma and understanding that. And in the disability world, there's certainly a lot of it, right? As we all know. The second side of trauma-informed care is the culture side that we made reference to. And that's what AUSTIC is trying to become. I would love it if AUSTIC could become the platform for Rhode Island, where all organizations that want to be involved in making a difference in the community, whether it be an artist, whether it be a police department, the state police, wherever it happens to be, can go to and learn about the principles of trauma-informed care. Because the second side of trauma-informed care are the things that we all know about, like collaboration and mutuality, transparency, that all the entities in the state of Rhode Island, whether it be police or whether it be the hospital, or whether it be a private organization, are all transparent with one another, and they're working together and they're collaborating with one another. So that's going to make things go a lot smoother if there's a call in the middle of the night and the police have to respond, and that police officer is trained in these principles and trained to know about what trauma is. And maybe they've got a mental health clinician riding along with them, or they call the police officer that has the mental health clinician and they show up on the scene. Now the ambulance doesn't need to get involved, and on it goes, right? So I think people should, Will and I keep talking about what's one of the main, and Christine, what's one of the main motives of AUSTIC? One of them has got to be training. We got to train everybody in what it even is. What's that side of it, and what's the culture side of it? They got to understand that. And then after that, it's engagement. Let's engage the community. Let's engage the police. Let's engage the hospital. Everybody. Let's engage the artists down the road. Let's sponsor events and get everybody showing up to them, and working together, because that's what trauma-informed care is about. So that's what I think people can do, is educate themselves. If they go to our website, they can leave information and how we can get in touch with them. They're welcome to join our monthly meetings. It doesn't have to be entities or folks like you, Tina, or other hospitals and that sort of thing. It could be anyone. It could be an artist that wants to join. That's what we're promoting. So that's what people can do. They can get involved and learn about it and spread the message. And that's what we're looking to do. We're looking to have a conference sometime in the fall. We haven't landed on an exact date as of yet. We're going to bring some speakers in, and we also plan on at some point bringing in folks from Tarpon Springs, Florida, that have instituted trauma-informed in their entire city. What an amazing thing these two people have done. We've had them in before. We want to get them back, and we want to get the right people in the room from Rhode Island. And I think we're going to be looking for you, Tina, to help define who those right people are. But getting the right people in the rooms to listening to that message about this is what we want to do, but we want to do it throughout Rhode Island. And we want AUSTIC to sort of be the center of that.
And it is
I agree with you.
Already. I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
We have places.
No, go ahead.
We have pockets in Rhode Island where it's happening already. We have judge magistrates who are doing things in their courtroom that are trauma informed, even though they may not call it that. The town of Coventry has a grant that they've been working on to make Coventry a resilient Coventry. And, I have found just professionally working with them that they've been wonderful in terms of just getting the right people in the room to have conversations. I think one of the things about trauma-informed communities, and Tarpon Springs, I think, was the first, but they're springing up all over the country, is that the recognition that you can throw a lot of money at the back end of a problem, whether it's drug misuse or suicide issues, you can throw a lot of money at the back end. But if you're not addressing the cause of those problems, which is rooted in trauma, then your money often goes to waste and you just keep spending more and not getting any improvement. That's what Tarpon Springs had found, that they weren't getting any bigger results from throwing more money at their homelessness problem and their domestic violence issues, but turning towards what is that cause and addressing the issues that are related to trauma is what's made a difference for them. And I think here in Rhode Island, people are already doing it. And, little by little, as our coalition grows, we're talking to each other and sharing resources, and it's just going to get bigger and better as time goes on.
Yeah, I agree with you. Nothing for us without us. If you talk to us before there's a problem, we're going to be able to help you solve it before you have to put a lot of money into it. One of my biggest things and why I started my organization, and this is why I feel AUSTIC and us fit so together. I was so sick of fighting to be at everybody else's table who didn't want to listen to me and didn't want to see the problem. So I created my own table and let people fight to be at my table. And that's exactly how it turned around. Now I've made the table. Now everybody wants to be here because they're finally starting to see and hear and see results, because we do it in a positive way. We do it in a different way. It's all about the approach. You could have the biggest, juiciest steak with all of the trimmings and you present it on a garbage can, and who's going to want to eat that steak? Nobody. It's all on how you present it. It's all on how you present yourself. And it's all on getting ahead of the problem before you're throwing money at the problem, behind the problem. Well, now we're getting somewhat near to the end of the hour. Give us some informative things that you think Rhode Islanders should know and why they should become part of AUSTIC. Kind of give us your summary of all of this.
Sure. So as we've discussed for the past 45 minutes or so, we're trying to build a coalition that crosses over into all parts of society in Rhode Island. And so we're really looking for everybody to be part of this. It's not just clinicians. It's not just providers. It's not just people who work in the field. We're looking to have anybody who feels passionate about making Rhode Island a more welcoming place to become involved. One of the things that I've loved about the Tarpon Springs initiative is that Robin Sanger, when she came last time, she was the vice mayor of Tarpon Springs and the person who started that Peace for Tarpon group. And when they run meetings down there, there's no hierarchy as far as who's the most important person in the committee. It's if you're there and you want to become involved, your voice is equal to anybody else's voice at the table. And if you have a good idea that can benefit the community, well, that opinion needs to be heard. Those ideas should be able to be acted upon. If you want to get a committee of people together to do something that benefits the community, that's the way it should happen. So I am most interested in, just because I'm not a clinician, I'm interested in how does the person who's not a professional in the field, how does that person become involved in making Rhode Island a more welcoming community? So I would encourage people to go on the website, as Christine has said, and let us have your contact info and take a look at the memo of understanding. It's something that you can sign on to become a member. It's not really that daunting. All you're saying is you want to make Rhode Island a better place. You're not signing your life away by doing it. But let us have your contact info so you can at least get on our mailing list, and so that you can start to become involved in whatever projects we might take up in the future that you might have some interest in. So there's something there for everybody, I think. The beauty of what we've done so far and what we're trying to do is that we're trying to build relationships that cross all sorts of, so that people can have relationships with people that they're not accustomed to having relationships. So anybody, no matter whether you have a disability or don't have a disability, there's a possibility that you could end up running across police officers or fire, first responders at some point. And if we have relationships that we've built with first responders, well, doesn't that make it more possible that you're going to have a good result when somebody shows up at your door and you're having a hard time? So, and we could point to so many different ways that relationships could go. Relationships are the key.
I agree with you. We are stronger together. And I don't know, anybody who knows me for 5 seconds knows I say that probably a million times a day, because I don't just say it. I truly believe it. Who cares who gets the credit? Who cares who gets the gold star? As long as the process gets done and as long as people are included and things are accessible, that's all that actually matters in the long run. So everybody has something to offer. Everybody has a different point of view. We need to hear them all, and you all need to join AUSTIC or RAMP or both, because now that we all work together, we're cross working together on all of this. So join both. But yeah, I mean, we are stronger together and everybody has a point of view. Christine, why don't you sum it all up for us and your point of view?
I think that there's so much that could divide us, with when we talk about, socioeconomics and race and religion and disability, or, there are just so many things that divide us. But in essence, we're all we have, and we're all the same. And we really need to learn how to live together in peace and make each other better. And so in some ways, there's much more spirituality to trauma and being trauma informed than one would think. It's about understanding that people are people, and that our bodies are the same, and we respond the same way to negative stimuli, and knowing that we can make each other better. And why wouldn't we?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. It is what it is. How boring would this world be if we were all exactly identical and did the same things the same way all the time? This world would be really boring. We wouldn't have the crazy Tinas out there, or the Christines, or the Wills, or the Randys out there to make life a little shaken up and a little different. So open your mind to a new perspective, make a new friend, even if they don't look like you. You could learn a lot from that person. You might actually be really interested in what that person has to offer that you would have never. I have met the most amazing people being on the meetings of AUSTIC, because it's people I wouldn't have normally met in my everyday, day-to-day life. That's why I love having an organization, because I meet the most incredible people that I would never have the opportunity to meet if I wasn't putting myself out there every day.
Yeah.
It's your life is all what you make of it. Don't waste it. Make the most of it. Randy, why don't you sum it up for us?
I was just thinking when you asked that question, it's everything that we're talking about right now, and everything that we've been talking about with AUSTIC is directly related to all of the issues that are going on in the world right now, if you think about it, right? So all the issues that have happened over the past 4 or 5 years, with the social injustices that have happened, and the rioting, and all of those things can, not easily, but all those things could be worked out if people adopted this approach, got together ahead of time in a proactive format, and groups started communicating with one another. Because once you communicate with someone about what they're really the message they're really trying to get across, you understand them a little bit better, and you understand the perspective, right? It's when you don't understand is when people start fighting and resisting and doing all this crazy stuff. So I was thinking like the roundup is exactly what the world needs right now. Not just Rhode Island, but the world just needs us to kind of come together and just listen to other people. Open your ears and listen. You got the whole 2 ears and 1 mouth thing, and communicate with one another. And I think if we did more of that, we wouldn't have half these problems. And I think we should start in Rhode Island.
I absolutely agree with you. Get rid of the fear of the unknown and actually open your mind to learning something new. Randy, why don't you give us the website again so people can go onto the website and check you guys out?
Yep, it's austic.org, OSTICC.org. And again, there's a form. If you fish around a bit, there's a form on there that you can fill out, and we can come on our mailing list, and we'll get back to you. And we'll include you and invite you to some of the meetings. And again, because it's about everybody's commitment to this, as Will said, it's not just professional folk. We're looking to get everybody involved here. And the more we spread the word, like you said earlier, Tina, the more people that like the podcast, the better, and the message gets out there. And the same thing with us. The more people that talk about it, the more the word gets out.
It's so true. Everybody has something to offer. Don't sit back in your home and complain this, that, and the other thing. We are giving you the opportunity to step up, have your voice to be heard, be seen, and be part of everything. And I want to thank you all, because AUSTIC is a huge supporter of the RAMP Red Bag Initiative, carrying all of your medical information on you at all times, non-tech based. And the only ones who get to see it are the EMTs and the doctors who take care of you. So go on to www.rampisinclusion.com and grab your red bag today. You will not be disappointed. My 21-year-old son carries one just because he wants to be an organ donor and wants to take that all out of my hands someday. So, it could happen whether you have a disability or not. It's something that, really works for you. I want to thank you all for coming on today. You can meet all of these fine, wonderful people on September 18th at our Accessibility is Beautiful event. You didn't think I was going to go by without putting a plug in for that. So everybody come on down to the Steel Yard on September 18th from 3 to 8. Have your voice, be seen, be heard. Come to our amazing comedy show. Come dancing with us with a bunch of people in wheelchairs and all different kinds of abilities. Dancing with all of our elected officials, because the Rhode Island delegation, the governor, the lieutenant governor, the secretary of state, the secretary prior, they're all going to be there with you to hear your voices, to join in the party. Amazing food with clam cakes and chowder. What's more Rhode Island than that? Breakfast foods and ice cream, dancing, DJ, comedy show. You can't miss it. September 18th at the Steel Yard. You can go onto our website, but definitely check out AUSTIC, OSTICC.org, and fill out the thing. You will not be disappointed. You will meet some of the most amazing people. And these three are, just a touch of all of the amazing people that you will meet. Thank you so much for starting this. Thank you so much for all you do in Rhode Island. And with all of us together pushing for you guys are going to be right up there, up top. And we are going to create the table that everybody is going to want to fight to be at. So thank you so much for being our guest tonight and being part of the show. I am really, really excited to continue working with you guys going forward. Anybody want to have any final last words?
Look forward to sitting at the table with you. Look forward to sitting at the table.
Thank you. Thank you for the conversation. Thank you for the new relationships. I mean, I think that's the essence of it, right? It's all about communication and relationships. And please, come to the website, give us your email. You can choose to come to a meeting. They're virtual at this point, and you don't have to talk. Just listen. And find your comfort zone with us, and we'll do great things together. Thank you.
Trust me, people, you will not be disappointed. AUSTIC, OSTICC.org. Go check them out. Join a meeting. Like I said, you can sit there and be quiet. I tried that. It lasted about 2 minutes. And then I joined right in. So now they're stuck with me. So, it is what it is. I did try to be quiet, I lasted about 2 minutes, and that was the end of that. But everybody join us next week, because next week we are continuing this conversation with the Rhode Island Developmental Disability Council, what Will referred to earlier that he worked with his son. They'll be on next week, same time, same channel. Make sure you join us. OSTICC.org. I cannot say it enough. You want to be part of these amazing people and this amazing organization, and they are a part of RAMP. They are part of our family now, so we are all working together. Thank you guys so much, and we will see you on the 18th, and have a great week. Don't just sit there, everybody. Make a difference.
Thank you.
Thanks.